Welcome back. I know you guys have been clamoring for the very special Beetlejuice episode. So, by popular demand, Chad, I thank you for not letting it escape my attention. I'll say that right now.
Mhm.
But yeah. So, welcome to another wonderful adventure, and obviously a little looser today, just like the box office budget to the intake for Megalopolis.
Mhm.
But unlike them, we're still available. um, no, there's a lot of interesting things in the works, and I think Megalopolis is definitely one to want to talk about too. Like, I know you haven't had a chance to see it. In fact, America pretty much hasn't had a chance to see Megalopolis, but I did, and for those who are interested, like you should totally see it. And unfortunately, not more people aren't going to see that on a big screen. And in fact, in an era where there's so many sequels and so many superhero movies, it's really unfortunate that a movie that's more original from an auteur of, like, I don't know, just so many generational films that'll stand the test of time, like Godfather, Apocalypse Now, movies that we're still talking about, 40, 50 years later. Like, it's unfortunate, but I won't lie. I walked out of that movie, and for a movie that allegedly Coppola had been trying to make for 40 plus years, like, I feel like if I spent that much time, I hope it would be a perfect film. It wasn't. It had its rough spots, but I feel like that movie is definitely made for film buffs and not the audience, not the general public at large. So I I, I kind of there's a reason that movie's not going to do well in theaters, but I'm so glad you made it because I got to see it, and you know, there's a lot of there's a lot of great acting. There's a lot of still, like, just clever movie making in that movie, and for anybody who's interested or danced around it, like, it's worth checking out once. Like you've watched worse movies. I mean, they made 7 or 8 of those Sharknado movies, so like people will watch anything. I highly recommend watching something that is at least entertaining if you'll give it a chance. But not a good time not a good
Well,
time for making $150 million independent film.
uh, well, without it's not without trying, I guess. Coppola's got, I mean, he even said in his own recent interviews, he tries to claim that when The Godfather came out, nobody liked it, um, at first, and he said that about a few of his other films. He's like, every time a movie I put out, he's like, you call them good now, but he's like, when they were made, nobody liked them. And maybe there's some truth in that. I wasn't around in the 70s era when those movies were being done. Um, but he has like he does swing for the fences. Certainly give him that. Um, but then there's a string of hits. There are Godfather, The Conversation, The Godfather Part Two, Apocalypse Now. Um, and then I would even say like there's an 80s period, which isn't my favorite of his. But then there's Dracula. I think that film's fantastic. Um, and there's kind of the rest of the 90s, which isn't my favorite. I actually do enjoy Godfather Part 3, and I have seen the Coda cut of it and enjoyed that more. Um, but I think he does have some hits and misses. Like there's a movie like called Tucker, the Man in His Dreams. I like that movie, but I don't know that anybody remembers it or even like if you like when was the last time anybody like when you think about like the Rainmaker, you don't go like, oh, Coppola, right? Like it just
Or
I don't know.
Jack with Robin
Yeah,
Williams.
yeah, exactly. Like there's
I
some
bet you
movies
didn't even
where
remember that was Coppola.
yeah, like there are some movies where he's he's doing his artsy thing, not artsy, but it's so good. And there's other movies where it just feels so generic. Um, and then then Megalopolis comes out, and we've seen this before with movies where somebody's tried to make it for 20, 30 years and they finally do. Maybe they've looked at it too much. Maybe time will tell. I remember thinking that with Man on Fire. Um, Tony Scott had been trying to make that for like 20 years, and I remember seeing it, and I liked it, but I was like, oh, it's too bad. Like, it took him 20 years, and I don't know if he hit it quite well. But then, obviously, I was wrong. As the years have gone by, it's like that movie's like fantastic by every frame. And maybe we'll feel the same way about Megalopolis down the road. We'll all be going like, I feel like Dracula was the same way. Like, I mean, I liked it in the 90s, but I was a kid, so of course I loved like the gothic horror, like rated R violence kind of stuff. I didn't realize like how much magic was in it, visual magic like on the screen, non CGI stuff, until a viewing last year, and I was going like, man, this is quite the masterpiece here. But when
Hmm.
it came out, I remember it's kind of like, eh,
I liked it. I
you know,
think it was like everybody looked at it as like popcorn junk, like
yeah,
right? Like it was like, oh, it's a box office movie,
uh-huh.
But I mean, I showed it to my kids um, for Halloween and whatnot. Like, yeah, it's a little older for them, but some of those like you kind of need to see some of those movies before you're ready because there is a magic to them. Like, it does
Uh-huh.
thrill you versus later on where it's kind of like, you're not as thing. But it is funny though. Like, I did see. So after I saw Megalopolis, like I kind of got in a kick of wanting to watch more Coppola, and I was like, there's a movie I've wanted to see forever. Um, I own it. No more excuses not to watch it because I own it. So I popped in One from the Heart as well, and it's funny because after like watching that movie and then reading the trivia about it and learning a little bit more about the movie, I was like, man, like it kind of is like so. One from the Heart, kind of the same like it's not his like dream project that he held on for years as far as I know, but like it started off as supposed to be a $2 million budget, and by the end it was like $20 million budget, and it made no money back. And in fact, when I was reading the trivia, they're like Coppola apparently claimed that the reason why he did all those paycheck films in the '90s was because of One from the
Yeah,
Heart.
had to pay back what he lost. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you go back and watch that movie, I watched the new recut, which is funny because like again, like out of all all the filmmakers like that that are notorious for recutting their films, like he is actually right up there, right? I mean, it's a
Mhm.
surprise that he hasn't redone Godfather 1 and 2 and then The Conversation. I
Yeah.
mean, why would you? But actually, no, I take that back. There was one point where like I think AMC was doing like it's Godfather 1 and 2, but it was sequential.
Mhm.
Um, and it was like this big opus that he did
I
recut
th-
those damn movies.
I think there's even a moment where there was all three movies cut together,
Yeah.
and it never like ended, and it never had the end credits. It just moved into the next movie somehow. And there were
Yeah.
scenes that like were only shown on television at the time, something like that. But yeah, yeah. So it
But
kind of doesn't necessarily finish the project. You're just saying, right? You know.
yeah, he keeps tinkering with it, and I mean, it kind of goes to his generation, right? With George Lucas doing like of that generation and kind of doing the same thing. But I feel like it with Coppola at least, like he refines it um, to where like a better product. Like I do like the Apocalypse Now, like
The
later
Redux.
cuts.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like that a lot more. One from the Heart, I haven't seen the original cut, but I didn't notice anything like it's just funny to me, like for an independent film, I feel like his hubris, which feels like the more I learn about, the more I watch his films and watch it, like he totally could have made that movie for $2 million and made it probably just as great. It's got basically no name cast, right? Terry Garr is like the highest. Well, I guess Raul Julia is in it too, and Harry Dean Stanton, but it's not like an all-star cast or anything.
Hmm.
But there's some great camera tricks in that, and it just didn't like he basically built everything on his own, like he wanted it to be on his own studios and own lot. So he rebuilt Vegas in his studios, and then he rebuilt the Vegas airport in his studios and got like a crashed 747 and like he just he refurbished it and whatnot. It's like, filming on location could have been okay for a couple of shots and saved like
Find a
millions of
building that we're gonna
dollars.
demo and that you can just pose as a as an airplane as an airport.
Or get permission. I mean, Vegas airport in the 80s, like it wasn't what it is now. You probably could have filmed there for not much money, but
Yeah.
like there's some cool stuff though, like camera trick wise and just filmmaking wise. There's a moment where it's like, you ever seen the movie One from the Heart?
No.
It's
Uh,
it's basically about this couple and they're tortured. It's a tortured love in Vegas where they basically fuck around on each other, but they love each other, but they're volatile and they go back and forth. Well, like, and they're like, "Oh, you're the one for me. I mean, the other ones didn't mean anything." Like, because it's Vegas and whatnot. But like, there's a moment where the dude is talking to his best friend, and they're sitting there having this conversation. Then he sits down. They both sit down on this couch and they're talking back and forth. And then all of a sudden, as they do, like the wall behind them, actually the light comes on behind, and it's a screen where it's sheer. And you see in the other, like there's another set behind them where the woman is talking to her best friend and they're having a conversation about the
oh
relationship, and
dang.
it starts like kind of dueling back and forth, and it's very much like like theater theatrical,
Yeah.
but so clever and so well done. And then the light on the front drops out so they're silhouetted, and it's almost like it's his dream in the background, but she's laying it down like it is. It's really, it's cool. Like it's just
Hmm.
there's nothing like it. And it was amazing to see and really cool to really like from a filmmaking standpoint, like Chef's Kiss, like as they come around, like they're kind of walking around through, and then we cut in, and then it's a whole nother room, but we never break, and we never. It's just a cool shot. Like the movie itself, it's worth checking. It's not Schindler's List, but it's entertaining. It's got a great soundtrack, and for a filmmaker who has the audacity to dream and dream larger than ever, like it, it's truly like it's a filmmaker's film. Like it's really cool. It's
Interesting.
just unfortunate his films tend to be filmmaker films and not like, I don't want to see the guy going broke making movies, but I guess we are. So that's what I gotta say about that.
Well, and as we're chatting, like, I wonder because like Scorsese is a person who doesn't make, um, he doesn't make like movies for Hollywood. It doesn't feel like, but it does feel as though if he did have to do like if he has to do Cape Fear, let's say he's like, oh well, I owed Universal a third film because they financed two other films. So like, but Cape Fear feels very Scorsese-esque.
Yeah,
And so it's kind of like, what is it about the two? Like, is it a control thing? Is it somehow Scorsese able to have his Scorsese stuff, but is able to somehow please whoever's financing it, and Coppola can't? Maybe like if he did one, if he did the movie you're speaking of, somehow in the budget, like somehow he didn't rebuild the Vegas airport, or maybe he had to put said actor in it. I don't know. Maybe Rob, maybe he was stuck with certain cast members because they were financiers. I don't know, but like, what is it? It makes me wonder. I don't have the answer. I'm just speculating. Like, what is it about? How can Scorsese do indie films and sometimes studio films that aren't studio, but he's able to still have his Scorsese flair? And then there's Coppola who has like things that should be seen by everybody when it comes to camera tricks. What you're describing, I'm going like, wow, I feel like already when you're describing that, something I should A, see, and B, I want to now do. It's like I'm thinking of my own film, Married and Loving, going like, wouldn't it have been like visually cool if we did a try to trick like that or something? So he has these amazing camera tricks, but they're hidden inside these almost dull movies, perhaps. or movies that just didn't succeed because of his control over the budget and other things. And sometimes it's a big win. Like when we chatted about Dracula, he fired all these department heads and just brought in his son to do it, which
Yeah.
sounds on the surface is like that sounds like a terrible idea. But then as it turns out in the movie, all the special effects done by his son are fantastic. Um, and the way in that movie, like where you might see a shadow on one hand and the character turns to the other, and then the character and then Dracula shows up over here. That's obviously planned out because you have to have the person who's creating the shadow, and then you have to have obviously Keanu Reeves has to know to turn this way, right, in the camera, and then Gary Oldman comes from the side. Like every shot is so planned. Um, and so in that one, he like it's a big win, but then yeah, it's like, but then he has to do these like when he did Jack, when he did the Rainmaker, like where are those camera tricks, and how could he not? It's a paycheck film, let's say, right? But how is he not
Yeah.
able to somehow inject his Coppola-esque into this paycheck film kind of a thing?
Yeah.
Um, and then before we get on, and not that all the listeners really think about this person a lot, but Buñuel has a similar trajectory. I feel like he has a he has a series of art house films that people will look back and remember a lot. And then he has a series of just paycheck films in order to get to the ones that are the art films that we remember. He went off and did like a Robin Caruso and other shit like that. That are kind of like throwaways, and then it's like Belle de Jour and the objects of my affection and stuff like that. So it's like an Italian Buñuel. I
Well,
believe Buñuel was Spanish. So for Chad out there, don't kill me if
well,
I
listen,
misrepresented that.
when you get to see Megalopolis, because I doubt you'll skip seeing it, right? It's just a matter of like being able to at this point. And
Yeah.
that's the thing I worried about most. Like we talked, I think, a little bit about this on the last time we chatted around like losing access to movies digitally, right? And
Yeah.
not having physical copies. Um, it's a crime that like some of these like Dawn of the Dead, like the original. If somebody wanted to go see that movie, like you kind of have to either be lucky enough to see it while it's on the road somewhere, like, but
Hmm.
you can't actually go out and buy it, or you can't digitally rent it. Like you can import it from another country, maybe if you have the right media. But like that movie, yeah, that movie's like quintessential, like why I loved horror growing up, and um, like just the blending of like horror and then also like social commentary about capitalism and consumerism
Hmm.
and just how when society breaks down, humans just degrade each other. There's so much great stuff in that movie, and it's now been out of print for 10, 15 years. Like two generations basically have grown up not
Oh,
having
really?
it around. Yeah, like you
You're
talk
talking
about,
Romero's Dawn of the Dead?
yeah,
I didn't realize it was that hard to get.
yeah,
But
it's
that's
been,
probably because I bought a copy 20 years ago, so I didn't think about it.
yeah,
But
like it's been
damn.
out of print for so long. Um, I heard it's not quite the same, but I feel the same way. As like I was reading about there's a band I used to enjoy quite a bit called Tool, and they talked about like it took them 20 years before they were willing to put their music out digitally, like on iTunes and stuff, because certain members didn't want to, so they didn't. And so he's talking about there's two generations of people that didn't get exposed to them in the ways that they listen to music. Like the only way you could get their music was to buy a CD or a
Yeah.
record, and that's not where the audience was. So
Hmm.
like at one point they got big, and then instead of like expanding out,
Hmm.
it plateaued. And I
Yeah.
I think about that with some of these films. It's like the Big Lebowski at this point is like so big, it's never going to go away, right?
Yeah.
Like Godfather as well, but the conversation, like it's a movie that we talk about, and it's a movie that is like celebrated by like cinephiles and film school. It's part of the curriculum usually, right?
Hmm.
But you take that movie out of print, like it'll fade to dust. Like
Yeah.
there's nobody else that'll get to love it because we don't have the same mechanisms
Hmm.
for film. Like you and I used to, I would watch Turner Classic Movies, or
Yeah.
HBO and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
there's an entire generation that's grown up rejecting cable TV and doesn't have that access, right?
Hmm. Well, even Turner Classic was it wasn't like it wasn't a buffet feast like where streaming you can search whatever they have to offer and you watch it as you want. Like even back in the HBO days, like I mean it's whatever they're playing, and it starts at
Yeah.
6. Um, but and it's not just the physical media. Like the movie can go out of print, but also the technology eventually might go out of like manufacturing print in a sense. Um, my dad recently bought a new car, um, and there's no CD player. And in fact, I don't have a CD player in my car, but I didn't. It doesn't bother me because I have everything through Spotify, things like that. But like you said, if a band like Tool's only available, if they're only available via CD, well then I can't listen to them in a sense in the car. Um, and because the technology itself doesn't play right, like the laptop I'm on doesn't have a disk drive, so it's only a matter of time. Then I could have, as you're saying now, I can have Dawn of the Dead on DVD, which I do. But the moment that my DVD players break, and if there's none other person making the technology repairing it, then it disappears out of our hands too. In that
Oh
same
yeah.
sense, because it's not available in a streaming kind of way. Um, but yeah, my dad was like, "So what do I do with all my CDs that I have? I guess they're just done." I was trying to give him the Spotify access. I was like, "Yeah, you can't drive. Listen to a CD anymore." Or, um, but
I mean, you could get him one of those nifty Blu-ray or Bluetooth casters and hook it into the side of a CD
oh yeah,
Walkman for him.
yeah, yeah. Well, they used to have like the auxiliary port, right? Like you could still connect your phone and somehow like stick it right into your radio, and you could play it that way in that sense. But
Hell,
you still
man,
have to have the phone, right? You'd have to be able to play it
first
off.
first car I ever had a tape deck, and so I had to like to play CDs. I had remember those wonderful like tape like it it was like a tape, but it had a cord that came out, and you plugged it into your CD player. Did you ever have one of those? Oh, your
My
sound cut
band,
out
yeah.
on me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you go through you have a Discman and then it
Yeah.
exports into a cassette tape. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, they're making a comeback, maybe. I don't know. It's just interesting to me because there's I love movies. You love movies, and for the dozens and dozens of fans, like they love movies too. That's why we're all here.
Yeah.
But it's it definitely is. It definitely is interesting, and I just like I I don't take like I'm the magic of being in a movie theater is something that I always cherish, and I don't know. I'm wrestling with it. Like I can't make it to the movie theater as much as I wanted to, and so like Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, like man, I want to see that in movie theater so bad. I want to take the kids to go see it, and honestly, just based on like all the activities and all the stuff going
Hmm.
on in life, and to be honest, like how expensive it is.
Yeah.
Like it was cheaper for me to just rent it digitally and then watch it
Mhm.
together. And it was still magical to see it that way, but not as magical as seeing it in a theater full of people. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. And we can come back into Beetlejuice, but I there's a number of factors. I think, personally in our lives, we're both busy. Obviously, we're filmmakers ourselves, auteurs, of art.
Yeah.
Uh, um, but also like, family men as well. And so, yeah, it makes me wonder if, 10, 12 years from now, will time free up for us in that sense. But I do remember being like when Armageddon came out, like the theater, we were on the edge of our seats. And
Oh,
yes, I said for Armageddon, like, I mean, it was high octane. It was And I remember when I saw View for Vendetta in a crowded theater, and it felt like, I mean, as soon as he goes into that first, like, the V speech that he does, the vilify, the villainous, blah, blah, blah. I don't think a single person in the theater spoke again until that movie was over because that caught everyone's attention. And I also remember seeing Hangover later, like weeks after everybody else had seen it and thought it was hilarious. And so by the time I saw it, there was four people in the audience, and I didn't like it really that much at the time I saw it. But I think if I had been in a room with 300 people and we as a communal were laughing at the same time, would have enjoyed it. Um, but the reason why I don't see as many, and so Beetlejuice is kind of a special treat. Like I see it, I saw it on a Tuesday where the theater price was dropped, but it was discounted down. It's almost the only way I can go. Or it's an old, or if I go to an old a theater and they're doing like an older screening, like Psycho or Ghostbusters, like the original Ghostbusters or something like that. And so a lot of times we've already seen those at home, but we want to see them kind of on the big screen. So yeah, but like when Cruella came out, so I have four kids, so it was like between my wife, I mean, it's like $70, like
Hmm.
just for 80 bucks just to see the movie. And I really liked Cruella. I thought they did a fantastic job. But, what if I didn't though? What if I went and saw it? You're taking a hell of a gamble. I mean, I had a fairly good idea that Fall Guy was going to be a good movie, but when the kids want to see it, it's a 80 something dollar gamble that that is going to be a good film. And um yeah, there's I think I remember Coppola and Scorsese and Spielberg saying this back in the early 2000s, and there was a talk about how that was when they were worried. I feel like every decade we're worried that theaters are going to be shut down. That's just kind of the thing that's been going on at least in our lives, as the technology at our home gets better. But I guess maybe they're saying that in the 50s when there was television was invented. But the idea was that the price of the theater ticket was going to be to a point as if the same as when you go see like a theater show, like a stage play where you would go and spend 50, $60 per one ticket. Um, that can get hard because as we know, movies, there's so many good movies and there's so many bad movies. And at least with a stage play, you're not necessarily like one performance is not the same as the next performance. Um, per a single night. So I can see why when you looked at it, Beetlejuice, you probably went as streaming for $30. That's better than paying 80
Yeah,
on the movie,
I
right?
had a feeling I'd like it. I'll be honest, like I even enjoyed the movie more than I thought I was going to.
Hmm.
Like, it over delivered for me. But it's just a matter of time. Like, you've got, three kids and sports activities and then a full-time job and then following your passions and you know when you're leader of the free world in cinema like we are, like, I mean, just there's not enough time in the day, so you catch it how you can, right? And I feel like that's, I've missed out on taking the kids to so many movies. Like we didn't get to see Despicable Me 4. Like, is it high art? No, but I did want to take them to see. I want to take them to see things they want to see as well, so they love the act of going to the movies, right? Like The Wild Robot, for a kids movie looks awesome. Haven't seen it yet. I'm contemplating whether I'm going to take the kids to go see it in a theater or like rent it online as well. Like it's just kind of the unfortunate reality. I can't get around to see everything. And there's certain movies like I made a joke with you privately and shared here. It's like I was talking about going and seeing a movie in theaters. Is like, they have my hard-earned $27 when I go see a movie, and it kind of feels like that way, even if it's just like just me.
Mm.
Um, but like for that price, like I really want to see Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I want to see that in theaters on big screen. Guy Ritchie movie, man. I love Guy Ritchie, and much like Coppola, like these filmmakers that I love, like I want to see their movies and support them, like
Hmm.
because I want them to keep making movies. And And if you haven't seen Ministry of Gentlemanly Warfare, like definitely worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
Like you have to buy it at home now, obviously, but
Yeah.
I bought it. I bought it on disc. I was like, I know I'm gonna love this movie, and damn right.
Hmm.
But I
What?
missed. I watched it on disc and went, man, a 70-inch screen. Yes, my poor me, right? In America,
Yeah.
70-inch screen. It just didn't feel like it was big enough because it was just so grand, and I laughed and loved how clever and wonderful and violent that movie was, and it was just a magic of
Yeah.
it was just a magic of seeing those type of movies with other people.
Mhm. Well, I think we spoke about this earlier in another episode about like the price is, it's not just the price of going, but like the price can also affect your mood about it. Like if we went to a high-end dinner and I had a steak and I paid $60 for an 8 ounce or whatever, right? What if the same cook, like if you had two restaurants back to back and nobody knew, right? And you walked into one and the chef made you the same steak, you paid $60 for it, you ate it. And then you went to another restaurant, the same chef showed up, cooked you the same steak, but you didn't see him, and he served it to you and you paid $10 for it. Would your enthusiasm for the two change, even though it's the same thing? And so, like, so you say that you really enjoyed Beetlejuice, and I will say I wasn't the biggest fan, but like it also makes me wonder, though I went on a cheaper night to see it, but like sometimes like I liked Fall Guy, but I don't know if I liked it for $60. Maybe I would have liked it differently at home, kind of thing. So the price sometimes persuades my opinion too on whether or not it was worth it, I guess.
I think some of it too is like the beauty of having kids is not not living through them like the mom in Black Swan, right? But revisiting childhood in a way that captures the thrills, right? And watching like the
Mhm.
fresh, like I loved Fall Guy mostly because probably more because of how my kids responded to it. Like for days, and I mean days, and even to this day, they have been like singing Kisses, I Was Made for Loving You,
Yeah.
which is it's funny to hear little kids singing I Was Made for Loving You. It's a catchy ass tune, great song. Uh, and because of their love for that movie, I love that movie probably
Yeah.
more so than you do, right? And they're like, "Oh man, we should watch that movie again." And I'm like, "Yes, we should. However, there's a whole world of movies, and we've got to visit
Hmm.
some of the other ones as well, right? Same with, because I mean, hard thing is just juggling how much we don't get a lot of time for all of us to sit down, like I said, but due to
Yeah.
all the activities, so it's nice to switch it up every once in a while for this guy because I need a little. But uh, I think with Beetlejuice, I think some of that was, I think that was also I had waited for something like that, and it's funny. I've actually fought, not like fist fought or really seriously argued, but just tried to explain to the kids. Like they'll be like, "Oh man, I love this movie. Is there a sequel?" I'm like, "You don't always need a sequel. Like sometimes it is good enough on its own." And then Beetlejuice. Like I was like, yeah, you know what? I think maybe I also like that movie more because like Tim Burton has kind of been wallowing in mediocrity for me for the last
Yeah.
10, 15 years. And so
Hmm.
for me, it was like, yeah, it's clever, it's rude.
It's nice. Yeah. It's nice to see him outside the Disney umbrella. And just as he's like, we'll kind of transition away from the pricing thing, but just as he's saying, um, yeah, after Dumbo, I didn't want to make movies anymore. I was thinking, yeah, after Dumbo, which I didn't see, I didn't care if you made movies either, man. Like I haven't cared in kind of a hot minute. Um, so yeah, like if he wants to stick around with Warner Brothers, yeah, far be it, man. Like, go ahead. Um, it was cool to see. My feelings around Beetlejuice. The first half of the movie I wasn't a big fan of. It was missing something for me, and I think Willem Dafoe is probably the better part of a lot of it. And he's all in, as you can tell. Michael Keaton. I mean, nostalgically, of course, seeing Michael Keaton again in Beetlejuice is great. Um, I feel like they downplayed how much he's in the movie. There's comments that I saw, not comments, but like it was like Michael Keaton only agreed to be in it if he was only in it for just as long as he was the first movie, which is like 17 minutes. But I have a pretty good feeling he's in this new one a lot more. That was a bit of a trick.
Yeah,
Um, and but I thought the second half of the film is where it really shines, and especially nearer the end, um, is probably its best moment. And so I kind of for the first half was a bit bored ish with some of the plot elements. I think you could take out a few characters like his like Monica Bellucci, um, but when it started going into the second half of the film, I felt like we were suddenly back again. And when it really took off into the final near the chapel scene, I'll just say that that's not giving anything away, but that's when I was like fully sucked in. I was like, this is really a cool movie. I like this a lot. And
yeah.
even though I say all that, I'd be happy if they made a Beetlejuice as a third film, just so they had that. And there's like with Ghostbusters Part 4, like there's moments where I'm kind of it is insane that there's in our there was so much talk about making a third Ghostbuster, and then they finally did, and they made a fourth. Like even Bad Boys 4, Axel 4, I'm kind of like I'm not the biggest fan, but I'm at least happy that they did it
Sure.
though. At the end of the day, because there's so much of my life that was like, will they ever make that sudden death too? But back to Beetlejuice. So,
I mean, it, it's hard. Like, if you can make a compelling sequel and make it work, like, yeah, do it, right? I mean, Lethal Weapon 2, superior to the first Lethal Weapon, I would argue. And even
mhm,
then, that first one's perfect. Like,
yeah,
so you one up it, you up the stakes and make it more compelling. Like, yeah, you can do it. But just as many as of those there are, like, sometimes it's, you know, I haven't seen Joker 2. I wanted to. I feel like I'm going to end up renting that as well, but I feel like that's a movie. It was a lightning in a bottle. The first movie is great. It's kind of a reimagining of, it's not kind of, it's a reimagining of Taxi Driver in a lot of ways, right?
yeah,
And I think that's because of that shorthand. I liked it.
hmm
And I think people responded to it, but people are rejecting this new one, and it's like, yeah, I don't, I mean, things go in waves, and there's been a lot of superhero movies that have failed, and then when I was talking to my brother about it, who loves movies as well, and we were sitting there talking about. He's like, oh, I'm like, that movie's gonna fail. It's not gonna make its money back. He's like, well, what do you mean? It's like they made the first one for like 30 million or something like that. I was like, yeah, but they made the new one for almost 200 million. He's like, no way. Look it up, and yeah, sure, it's like 180, 170, I think. It's like what? Like, what room do you give yourself to succeed
yeah,
when ticket sales are down kind of across the board? And like, I know
yeah,
everybody wants to go bigger and grander, but also like there is I kind of hope like, not, I don't hope for movies to fail, but I hope like we get back to maybe studios moving away from like making it a sequel that has 10 times the budget of every movie. And God bless Ryan
yeah,
Reynolds for actually like turning down extra movie for some of the Deadpool like sequels, like forcing them to like be more frugal and also be more just creative with their
mhm,
grander budgets. Like it makes those I think it makes like it's the reason why the Deadpool movies are still fun, and they're not, and they
yeah,
make money because they're not making them for $500 million per
yeah.
movie. I hope that the studio system kind of goes back to doing more like what they did kind of in the 70s. Like get away from making all these tentpole movies where you're making it for 100 million plus. Get back
Hmm.
to making like reasonably priced like 2, 10, $5 million budget movies that are more author led, and see like if we can get back to a time where
Hmm.
you have original stories that will it make $1 billion in the box offices? No, but it'll have a better chance of connecting with people, and it has a better chance of success because instead of having to, you know, bring in 800 million, if it makes 40 million, it's a success story,
Hmm.
right? That's where that's where I keep feeling like this is the beginning of that that era, right?
Hmm.
Because you can tell like um you can tell reasonably like Evil Dead Rises. Did you saw that one?
I didn't see Rises yet. I started it, I think, but I didn't. It was late. I didn't finish it. But
That's okay.
I mean,
Evil Dead. You saw the Evil Dead remake though, right?
yeah, I loved it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Same thing to say about either one of those movies, right? Like
yeah.
the budget for the Evil Dead remake is not super high. In fact, it's all unknowns really when they make that
Hmm.
movie, right? Same for Evil Dead Rises. I can't think of anybody I've seen in anything else before. And that's okay because I'm enthralled by what I see in that movie and thrilled by what I see in that movie. And I still talk about and have seen those movies, I don't know, quite a bit. And horror's not the
Hmm.
only horror's not the only
Yeah,
type of movie, but we can do an unknown and not have every actor making $30 million on top.
yeah. Well, there was ways to do action films. I still think there's ways to do action films on the Evil Dead remake budget somehow, and that's probably where, like Lethal Weapon, as you mentioned earlier, that was a movie that was intended to be a B movie when they
Yeah.
made it, and it turned out to be the thing they were. There's probably 1,000 dynamics to it, and I didn't write a thesis on economics of filmmaking or anything like that, or the film genre. But there's times where we watch movies, you and I will talk about showing our kids movies, and I try to give them like, if we show them like True Lies, I'm like, you don't understand at the time, this this movie was the biggest fucking movie of the year. Like everybody was waiting for this movie to come out and have the highest budget of all time, and it was going to explode. And Jurassic Park was like this movie. It's like we had so many different event movies, and I think that the studio's still wanting to do that. Deadpool does it successfully, the newest one, right?
Yeah.
It's an event movie that's happening, and when that event happens, like everybody's talking about it. It's all over our internet, it's all over our social media channels, the memes and everything like that. Something's happening. Like that thing was going to explode because they're doing it really well. Um, but that's not what it felt like that back in the 90s when it was Independence Day. It was like that movie was everywhere and you couldn't even get a fucking ticket. They were sold out. I remember driving back and forth to theaters. I wasn't driving, my dad was, but like we'd drive because you couldn't see it on your phone as far as like the ticket prices. You had to drive to the place to find out that they were sold out. That
Oh,
reminds me, by the way, the Carmack Theater where we used to hold New Ogden Cinema meetings in downtown Ogden. Uh, it eventually turned into a movie grill or
yeah.
Broovies. Yeah, they wiped it out. It's dust now.
Uh,
Um, I
well,
was driving by and and like I was like, holy shit! And I hit the brakes and the kids were like, what? And I was like, oh my god! And they're like, what? And I'm like, they're killing the theater. And I pulled it, and for them it means nothing, but for me it was like I saw The Rock there. I saw Metro. I saw Ghostbusters 2. I saw, and then eventually like we used to do our New Orleans cinema meetings there, but it's gone. Anyways,
yeah.
I'll get back to my other point. We can come back to the cry fest of the other thing, but it does make me wonder. Like they had event movies in the '90s, and but also we didn't have streaming, right? So there wasn't 1,000 different items to go see, and now there are. And you'll have a movie with it should be an event movie like that last Mission Impossible movie. I know they're playing it off like it was a big event movie, but it didn't hit like it was supposed to. But then you have an event movie like Deadpool, and it fucking explodes across our what we call it, zeitgeist or whatever the hell the word is, right?
That guy's
Um, Zeitgeist, yeah. And then you have a movie like Joker Part Two, which should be another hit, and somehow it's a miss, and I don't and I can't blame it. I can't blame it all on. I don't feel like I should blame it all on because there's a thousand different options. Because when Deadpool came out, Deadpool versus Wolverine, there's a thousand different options. But I don't know,
But
like
you're giving the
you know,
audience something that
they've
like
been wanting though. Like
they've been
that's the
wanting
thing.
for.
Like yeah. I mean, I I think I said that, when not only is Wolverine in the yellow suit, but he's also in multiple suits, and he's also in multiple comic book covers. And then the moment that they never show us in the trailer, and he pulls the thing over, and I go audibly, I was like, "Fuck yes!" And my wife looked at me, she's like, "Did you just say?" Fuck? And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Because you don't know, like we've been waiting this whole time for this moment, right?"
Let's fucking
So
go, indeed.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
that maybe that's the difference between the last Mission Impossible versus Top Gun, right? Because it's not that audiences are burned out on Tom Cruise because people
oh yeah,
and their moms showed up for Top Gun
Top Gun.
Maverick,
Yeah.
but to be fair, like that movie has been in the works for so long that it was something that the audience wanted to see, right? And they happened to make a movie that was
Mhm.
awesome. And you know what's sad is like Mission Impossible, like I'm kind of too behind on that, and I wanted to see the new one too. I wanted to see it in theaters, and I started working through them, but again, like time ran out, and now I supported because I bought the movie, but still haven't watched it. To be fair, so man, yeah, that's a good reminder for myself. But
Well,
I
I will say Maverick, Top Gun Maverick, though I thought it had a great story,
yeah,
and I thought that they executed that story perfectly. I can't say that for the Mission Impossible movies. As much as I've loved them, I'm kind of like there's parts that are like it's it's not convoluted. You have this saying, and you can correct me, but where it's like confusing but not intriguing or something like that. Where like it feels complex, but it's really just confusing,
yeah,
and not like Tree of Life confusing, but like where it's like you know I'm a fairly smart guy, but like some of this isn't. It just feels like we're just throwing a bunch of stuff into the ether. And when you listen about how like they put together the movie, they're like, well, we're wrapping the story around these like stunts, and I don't know if that was the case in Maverick,
sure.
where you wrapped it around the stunts. Anyways, to
No,
whatever you're gonna say. Sorry.
no, you're good. So just to clarify, you're close, and I love it so much that I just gotta add add to what you said. But there tends to be a trend where people want to treat confusing as if it's complex, right? Like
Okay, yeah, that's what it is.
that,
Yeah.
and honestly, like the Mission Impossible films I've seen, like number four is very much that way. Like they kind of try to treat it as like, oh man, we're so mind blowing and whatnot. And it's like, actually, no, it's kind of the opposite. Like it's like at one point the main bad guy is dressed up as his bodyguard.
That's his own henchman.
And it's
Yeah.
like that's
It's
not
like if Odd Job and Goldfinger just ripped it off. He's like, no, it was me, Goldfinger, all along.
yeah
It's like, okay,
yeah why
I guess let's just
like
fight this. We're
so
still
then
fighting though.
why did we need the henchman?
Yeah,
Like we could just cut
yeah,
that character out completely. It's a waste of
yeah.
time. Like I don't know. Like that part makes no sense. And I'll be honest. Like you say that line about like them figuring out the beats of the movie based on the stunts they had planned. Like four is totally that because they're like we've got the Burj Khalifa, the largest building in the world. What stunts are we gonna do around that?
Mhm.
Like oh, so that's why we're in that shitty ass. But like, huh? I mean, it was cool to watch him like climb the building and shit. But like,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that's I don't know. Like, I guess just to like, it's funny. Like for me, I complain about not I complain about, but people, and I don't think it's just me saying people as in the Twitterverse people, like, but people complain about like there's no original stories and it's all superhero films, this, that, and the other. But like, where were all those people when The Nice Guys came out? When Shane Black made a movie
That
that
movie
is
rocks. Yeah.
fantastic from beginning to end, that's original. It's not a
Hmm.
superhero movie. It's got great actors. It's got A-list actors in it.
Yeah.
And nobody but you, me, and three other people I know
Hmm.
saw that movie, which is a goddamn crime because Shane Black is one of the best like original
Hmm.
storytellers.
Back to
Like,
Lethal Weapon. Back to Monster Squad.
yeah,
And he directed Iron Man 3.
yeah,
And so he's done the Marvel thing,
yeah.
you know?
And Iron Man 3, it's been a while since I've seen it, but Iron Man 3, like after Iron Man 2, felt like a breath of fresh air.
Hmm.
It was more of an auteur film than some of the other stuff that was coming out. But I mean, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, great film. The Predator, not the greatest of all films. It's probably still not the worst Predator film. But but like for a guy that came up with like Long Kiss Goodnight, Last Boy Scout, and all the other cool guy shit, like I mean, I actually just watched Monster Squad with my kids last night to prep them for Halloween and stuff. And just the cool line, the cool guy dialogue in that movie
Yeah.
um, is
Like when the
awesome.
guy who's been like the bad boy the whole time, but he's
Yeah,
still hanging out with the group and he doesn't want to see like he doesn't want to see the one kid get bullied, but he's still kind of like he's only in it so he can get closer to the chicks or whatever, right? But
yeah,
then near the end of the movie, when we're like, what are you doing, man? And he's like, walking away to go kill vampiresses. He's like, I'm in the fucking club, aren't I?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's like, yeah, like he's in it. He's invested, like his character has evolved to like, no, I am part of the Monster Squad as well, as much as I was just here for chicks and who gives a shit kind of thing, you know?
yeah.
So even I love the mom and dad, like that big divorce fight that they're having. whatnot. That's like just tearing that household apart.
Traveling
You
back into the 80s and 90s, Ryan, when you watched that movie, how close to home did it hit?
well, there's movies where like I can't think of there's a I can't remember which one it is. There's a Nick Cage movie. Doesn't matter, but there's movies where you can tell like the actors didn't spend more than 5 minutes together before they had to portray like a married couple kind of a thing. And probably because they're supposed to be cutesy and like this is a great relationship. But if you just but somewhere in the 80s, like every writer and director's mom was going through a divorce. So Spielberg had all his divorced parent shit going on in his movies, and Monster Squad didn't skip a beat either. Like, you know, the dad's all stressed out about his job, the mom's smoking cigarettes in the kitchen, whatnot, like, and the
Hell,
kids are just trying to like survive and whatnot.
yeah, at 13, they're smoking cigarettes. God bless America. I miss those days.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's funny to like to go back through like I think we talked about this last time, or maybe we talked about it offline, but going back and rereading cinema speculation, like it's funny because like I think you mentioned it earlier, just like how invested you get into a certain era of filmmaking, and for man, for Tarantino, it's all about the 70s, which makes
Uh-huh.
sense. Like that's when he's a kid and seeing all that shit. And like for him, it's like the late 60s and then the 70s. Like filmmaking's at its peak. And
Hmm.
for me, like I actually will give it to you. Like there's a lot of stuff in the 60s and 70s. Yeah, that is peak filmmaking. However, peak fun filmmaking is in the 80s when they were doing so much cocaine and went, what are we gonna do this time? It's like
Yeah.
Howard the Duck. That's the comic book movie you're gonna get. Howard the
Yeah.
Duck. We're gonna have Marty McFly's mom bang this animatronic duck with his duck dork. Like, I mean, it's that, that yeah. Why are '80s kids so fucked up? Because Howard the Duck was our comic book movie, kids. Like, we didn't have no Avengers saving the universe.
When they made the toys, man, they made the toys from the movies that you weren't supposed to see. Like the
Yeah,
shit, the
yeah,
shit that we're talking about now. Like, in fact, I pulled out because I have a lot of toys from my childhood, and I suspect that I know that you do too. So like, I mean, I know you do because I've seen it, but I don't know if you do anymore. But like, um, but yeah, I pulled out a toy bag and I was like, I have a toy, I have a Demolition Man toy, and we watched, which they haven't seen, but I was like, but Aliens, we did watch Aliens, and I was like, here's the Aliens toys, RoboCop, and like I had a RoboCop statue. I ended up giving to you because your son was falling in love with RoboCop. So and
Still plays with.
yeah, and they would go and make a RoboCop cartoon show. Like um, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just funny the shit that was marketed to us, like, yeah, like you said, and it'll be interesting, like as time goes on, to like like examine 80s into 90s, like Terminator 2, like not a kid-friendly film, however, like beyond marketed to kids, like it
Yeah,
trailers for it
boys everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Most expensive movie ever made at the time.
yeah.
The main protagonist is a child, right?
Uh-huh.
Similar to our age,
Uh-huh.
and yet there were action figures out the ass for Terminator 2, like, um,
Mhm.
and yeah, Demolition Man. I want to say Cliffhanger, but like there's all this stuff that was just like geared towards kids that's definitely never should never be. I mean, dude, Rambo had a cartoon show. And that
Yeah.
was just to grease the rails so you would pop in Rambo 3 and find out how Ronald Reagan defeated communism by sending Rambo over into the
Mhm.
Middle East. Like that's
Well, and then you'd play the video game if you had
hmm
a Nintendo or an Atari. Like I had RoboCop 2 on Nintendo.
yeah.
Um, and I'm sure there's Rambo game, but like uh yeah, so you're in those yeah, you're just basically soaking in it in a sense. That kind of sounds bad, but as a child, um, in that era, so of course you're gonna want to see these movies that are full of these badass characters.
It's just funny to see like I don't know. There's a moment in time where like everything became PG-13 and that's like been the focus, right? Like
Hmm.
to the detriment, I think at times like watch watch David Ayer's Suicide Squad versus James Gunn's Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
Like David Ayer wanted to make an R-rated movie and DC like ended up shitting on him.
yeah.
And if he had, probably would have had a decent like there's some parts of Suicide Squad I feel like the edit is the weirdest thing about that movie. Like because
Hmm.
it'll go from like Will Smith seems bipolar because he'll be like brooding in one scene, they'll be like smiling, joking in the next, and he's back to brooding in the same.
Yeah.
It's the same scene, and if they would just let him make the movie, it probably
Make that
like
movie. Yeah.
would it have been great? Possibly not, because to be honest, most of David Ayer's other movies, they tend to be a hot fucking mess. Like I love Sabot I love Sabotage because it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like kind of like
In his movie return.
yeah, it's in that era of where he's like getting back into making movies, and it's also edgier than because he'd been the governor, and it was just him getting back, and like it's trying to be like it's trying to be edgy, and I enjoy that movie, but not because it's a good movie. I enjoy it because it's got my hero in it. But like harsh times, like I want to love that movie. Like there's things about that
Yeah.
movie that I like a lot, but I think about that movie, and there's things about I hate that fucking movie, and I should love it
Well,
for certain
what's
aspects.
what's the Arnold flick? David Ayer did it, and they fuck, I don't even remember the plot. I think Arnold's on a plot for revenge or something like that. But like, there's at one point where one of the characters is on meth, and
It's
they
Sabotage.
oh, it's sabotage. Okay, I was thinking for some reason you said sabotage. I was thinking, what's the one
Last
that's
Stand.
basically like the Last Stand? Okay, I was thinking the Last Stand for a second, but yeah, sabotage. Where like yeah, like everybody has to go so far. Like I've said before, like the Joker can't just be the Joker. He has to have ha 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 tattooed on his face.
Yes.
Like in order for you to understand that like he's a bad guy or whatever. And yeah, kind of interesting in the sense. You were mentioning before we started recording Underworld, which was like you were like, well, that's a PG-13 rated R movie. And it reminded me that there was a moment in time where like so The Matrix was rated R, and there was a thing where like through the 90s where it was like rated R was well, just it didn't matter. Like, it seemed like then suddenly there's a shift that was like, well, if we make it PG-13, then more people can see it. So like Die Hard 4 came out as PG-13, and there's kind of a slew of we're kind of stuck in this PG-13 era, and then a movie comes along. I think it was Deadpool actually, that was rated R, and then the studios were like, "Oh my God, like people like rated R," and it was like, "Yeah, we've always loved it. What are you talking about?" Like, and then like, "Oh, well, now Batman versus Superman has to be rated R, and let's convert this other movie into rated R." Um, and then they'll and Logan, and we'll make it specifically rated R. Like, he's not just gonna say fuck; he's gonna say fuck. Well, now, like Professor X will say it too. And I don't know. I wish that they would like instead of the ebbs and flows. I wish we could just go into a just make the goddamn movie in that sense. And sometimes it'll be rated R, and sometimes it's not. I don't know. Like,
I mean, John Wick did it like it again, but like John Wick came out and didn't have like it wasn't like a $50 million production. I don't think for that first movie. It came out the first one. Yes, they built bigger and bigger and bigger, and by
yeah,
the fourth one, you're like, this movie's a little long, it's a little too big.
yeah,
But I don't know. I think like truly, I think for a movie that feels like it's should be rated R, and then the studio tries to water it down to get it in more hands, like movies being rated R never prevented us from seeing them when we were kids. Like I
yeah.
saw 8 millimeter in theaters at like 14 years old, and it
Mhm.
wasn't because and it's not because I should have, because that movie is beyond rated R. Like that movie. I mean, I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but it was in '98. I think it was like '98, '97, something like that. That
Yeah.
movie is pretty dark. I mean, it's about snuff films, and it's about
Hmm.
what's supposed to be an actual snuff film. Like
Yeah.
I saw
There
it and
was
I shouldn't have. Like
yeah, there was a moment so I saw Eyes Wide Shut in theater and and I went with a friend of mine, CJ, and we went to the mall to see it, and they wouldn't. I think it was that movie. It was either that or There's Something About Mary or American Pie. One of the it was I saw each of those in theaters, but like there was a moment where I went to buy I bought the ticket and I'm I don't even have a driver's license. Um, so I buy this ticket for the movie, and the guy didn't blink. And there's not a long line behind me. This is like we skipped school to go see Eyes Wide Shut, I think. And so to see like an 11 o'clock, like so there's not like a long it's not very congested. You can see in that sense what I'm trying to say is like you can see me and see or CJ and I like speaking before we walk up to the podium to buy the ticket. And I say Eyes Wide Shut, and the guy goes, "Okay, cool." And he sells me the ticket. And then I step aside, and CJ says, "I'll take Eyes Wide Shut." And he says, "Okay, do you have an do you have an ID?" and and he doesn't because or maybe he did because he could drive, but anyways, so they wouldn't sell him a ticket, and so he looks at me again. There's no wall of magic that's protecting us from being seen by the usher. And he says, "What do I do?" I says, "I don't know, pick another movie." And so he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll take American Pie." And the guy's like, "Okay, cool." And he sells him an American Pie ticket. And I was like, "Well, just pick another movie. As we walk down the hall, we'll go into the other one." And it's just so dumb because like American Pie was just as rated R as Eyes Wide Shut. In the sense, like there wasn't like one was NC-17 over the other, but like again, it's not like we circled back around and there's a 400 people in the mix and the guy just couldn't recognize. Like there's two people in line. It was him and I. But the guy wouldn't sell him an Eyes Wide Shut ticket. And as he sees us both discuss it, then he sells him another ticket. And I was like, I think we went through the exercise of stupidity on that one.
I
But,
mean, really, what are they going to? I mean, I want to say you were with me when we went and saw Django Unchained in theaters.
hmm
And
Yeah,
man,
awesome.
I loved every second of seeing
Uh-huh.
that movie. And then I think it was about three-quarters of the way in, I heard somebody behind me go, "Dad, what's going on?" I went, "Are you brought a fucking kid in this movie?" Now, in the spirit of good taste, I would not take a near toddler to go see a Quentin Tarantino movie in theaters. That is beyond the limits of taste. But I don't know. Like we figured out how to see these
Yeah.
movies. I feel like people, if it's good on its own merits, rather than worrying about making the audience find the movie, like the audience will find the movie if it's right.
Done
And
well. Yeah.
I think if they would have been ballsy enough to commit to their first Suicide Squad being rated R, and just promoting that, like the audience would have shown up for it. And by
hmm
not doing, because I think that and Deadpool came out close to the same time, and Deadpool was ballsy enough to go like, "We're doing this rated R," and
hmm
Suicide Squad and Warner Brothers is like, "You guys do that, but we're going to go over here and keep failing while we watch the Marvel Universe do
Yeah.
this." So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
at that time, Deadpool was still a 20th Century Fox product. Or
yes.
as far as the movie franchise go, like it was copyright by 20th Century Fox. Um, so that's like with the new Deadpool, that's kind of like probably the bigger leap is that Disney continued the Deadpool franchise in the vein that they'd done the other two, and I would imagine that's to Ryan Reynolds like negotiating of power of persuasion and whatnot, but he also has the box office numbers to show it. But yeah, I think you're right. I think had DC been ballsy enough to go, especially when you're already selling a Batman versus Superman rated R cut, like to just go like, cool, let's just do Suicide Squad as rated R, or maybe just don't hire David Ayer for the fucking movie. Like if you haven't seen the other two, like I don't think the guy, I don't think he's aiming to make a kid's version of it. Like, but
Well, I
I
mean,
don't know.
for a writer, like he's done like I think usually like for the most part, I like the stories of his films. I think he kind of rose to acclaim with Training Day, right? And
Yeah.
man, that movie's great. But again, it's lightning in a bottle. Like you can't
Uh-huh.
replicate that every time. And I think David Ayer, from watching his films, like even Sabotage, right? He's wanting to tell the stories of Los Angeles and the side of Los Angeles that he knows.
hmm
And I think that instead he should just tell a movie
Yeah.
in a better way and not be
Well,
so
and
focused on making it Los Angeles that I know.
yeah. Or yeah, I mean, End of Watch was not too bad. I like that one. I think
Enjoy
his
it.
I think his best film in my opinion is Fury, and it has nothing to do
Yeah.
with LA.
Hmm.
And it was all
That's why
the
it's so good.
yeah.
Yeah. I actually I was watching I was showing my son Kelly's Heroes with Clint Eastwood, and a byproduct of that was like they were talking about the tanks. And it's like, man, I couldn't help but think of Fury because
hmm
there's like you have to get behind the tank, and that scene on its own merit is
Yeah.
just gut wrenching, thrilling, builds anxiety. So well done,
Yeah.
so damn well done. Um, and yeah, that's probably his masterpiece. Like if he never does anything else again, like he could go to that movie and be like, made a good
Yeah.
one. And
Yeah.
that's
Probably the best tank movie ever, like World
yeah.
War II tank movie. Though I haven't seen Kelly's Hero, so I'll let the
Oh
let you
man.
decide. I'll let you and Chad figure that out. But
I mean, I don't know how you missed that one. Like that's one of those ones like that was of the era where remember you know how like TNT would do like Saturday movies and shit like
Hmm.
that, or USA would show movies and the, like Kelly's like it's that Kelly's Your Heroes, Where Eagles Dare, like
Hmm.
they weren't Dirty Harry where they could actually show those movies on TV,
Yeah.
but well, I grew up loving those movies. I don't know, like it's just interesting to me, and I know we probably got to wrap things up, but it's funny to me, like the the duality of it, right? It's the we need more original storytelling, and you get a filmmaker like Ryan Johnson, right,
Hmm.
or J.J. Abrams to take over a franchise that, again, like Star Wars, mired
Hmm.
in mediocrity for so damn long, right? After making
Hmm.
this incredible trilogy, just making a bunch of stuff that nobody wanted, and then at the end of the day, was the new trilogy perfect? No, but considering what it could have been, and considering like the chances that
Hmm.
both the filmmakers and the Disney took in some of those, like, I mean, out of the three new movies, like Ryan Johnson's is the best out of all three of them. I think like it has the most. It gives you more feelings to the original trilogy. I think like
Yeah.
there's much more at stake. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous film. It's
Hmm.
clever, and it gets the most shit because that's not what Luke Skywalker would have done. I mean,
Interesting to hear you say that because I don't think that was your feeling when you first saw it. And I there's a lot of movies that as time goes on, there's a lot of movies that I didn't necessarily love the first time I saw them, and as time goes on, I love them. And you were there and you loved them initially. Here's an example: *Inglourious Basterds*. When that movie came out,
oh man,
you and I were in Orlando. I lived there. You flew out to see me. We went and saw that movie, and I'm such a Pulp Fiction person that like I was like, well, that was cool, but it wasn't his masterpiece. As I walk off, and you were like, no, that's his masterpiece. And as time goes on, I go like, fuck, actually, that movie is amazing. And then Django comes out, and I think I was like, well, Django's really good. I liked it. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I walked out of there. I walked out of it going like, God, I liked it, but I didn't love it. And then it's probably I've seen it probably more. I've gone to more movie locations around it. I've seen uh it's probably closest in how many times I've seen it. I may have seen it as many more times as Inglorious, but Inglorious Bastards is like 10 years on it. So there's a lot of times I see a movie and I like Beetlejuice, where I'm going like, wow, it's cool, but I didn't love it. So, and I hate to be that Debbie Downer, but anyways, but I walked out of Last Jedi, and that was another movie where I was like, where I said fuck audibly in the theater, not yelled it, but like, but like the moment where like the fucking, I don't know what's called, and I'm not a Star Wars person, but the one room is burning to the ground, and Kylo Ren and Rey turn their backs against, like, with the lightsabers out. They fight the red dudes and whatnot. The
yeah.
Emperor's Knights, whatever the fuck they're called, anyways. And it's in half slow motion, but it's like a wide shot. And I remember going like, uh, I saw it twice in one day because it's like we went and saw it with work, and then I loved it so much. Like I messaged Justin. And I was like, I'm thinking about seeing this movie. You see it, and I was like, I haven't seen it yet. I saw it, but there was a lot of hate around that movie when it first came out, and I remember having a lot of conversations with people going like, "Good God, like you guys will love this in about 5 years. About 5 years, you're gonna it's gonna be the sweet spot."
I
And
think you're misrem to defend
or
my
maybe
own honor. I think you and I enjoyed it, but we were
okay,
I worked it for Phil Mickey at the time, and we went up there
okay,
and Phil, if I remember right, and if I'm misremembering, Phil, you won't give a shit. You'll never watch this. But anyway, I'm pretty sure he was the one that was like, "No, man, it would Luke Skywalker would never do that." And it's like, yeah, that's kind of the great part of it. It's
yeah,
like Luke Skywalker was not the hero anymore, and that is kind of the magic of that. God,
yeah.
the magic. There's no cowboy riding in to save you. You are going to have to save yourselves.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
I liked it.
Or he saves you in another way that we weren't expecting. And
Yeah.
his character even says that he's like, "What do you want me to do? Come in here and all lightsabered up and yada yada." And but anyways, okay. Well, perhaps, but uh, yeah, I would love it. How would we get to there? We're talking about mediocrity in Star Wars movies, and then
Just
Abrams and Ryan Johnson's coming along, and
original storytelling being
so
lost. I
original
think people are
storytelling. Yeah.
so focused on like just the sequel machine and the tent pole world. Like, how do we
Yeah.
get it back down to like audiences will find it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's why horror movies like they're they're just as much of a gamble, right? But
Hmm.
they require much less and require more ingenuity in a lot of ways, right? Because the budget's going towards effects for the biggest kills or most original kills,
Hmm.
and then you go see it and it, they come up with a half decent premise and people go see it and pay to see no name people because there's a reason
Yeah.
to. You're watching the cannon fodder, right?
Mhm.
Why can't we get back to that with, like you said, action films? I think
Hmm.
it'd be a decent transition actually. It's like give these people what they want. I mean, hell,
Hmm.
Fast and the Furious movies turned into basically superhero movies. They're driving in
Yeah.
fucking space.
Yeah.
And,
Well, could you make a Bad Boys type movie today on a budget that, if you factored in inflation, would be something similar? Martin Lawrence was a hot ticket when they did Bad Boys, and Will Smith was already a hot ticket too.
sure.
So it's not necessarily now. Maybe they hadn't been movie hot in a sense, but they were known for sure. Um, as 2 stars and at two, like, not 2 stars as a rating, but like two different stars, right? Individual and with their own careers. So could you do that? Vince Vaughn said something on it. He did a episode of Hot Ones and he was talking about raunchy comedy movies for the like R-rated comedy movies, and he was saying how like the studios just don't want to gamble on it. So I turned to Brandy, my wife, and who's also a filmmaker, who's also her and I collaborate a lot in our writing, and I told her, I was like, that's something that we should be doing. I was like, you can't cancel me. I'm not even there. So I was like, that's what we should do. I was like, we come up with fucked up jokes all the time. I was like, let's just make an R-rated comedy because just the studio is not willing to do. They're not willing to do it. Well, let's do it. And so that's my pitch at times is Bad Boys, the first film, Bad Boys level budget action films, and then rated R comedies on a budget level.
I, yeah, man. Uh, here, a hero of mine, Tom Rockwell, once said we were talking about Lone Ranger. We were going like
Oh
150
yeah,
million dollars for a
yeah,
western. God, you give me 150 million dollars, I'll give you 150 kick-ass westerns. And damn,
yeah,
that's some ballsy shit. I
yeah. I
remember asking
remember
him about
that.
it later, and he was like, "Yeah, I revised it." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I'd give you 300 kick-ass westerns." And I was like, "That's the kind of fucking can-do attitude we all need around here." Um, but I mean, again, like you look at you look at where people get sometimes. It's like success does not breed competition or ingenuity, right? Like it's
Mhm.
why like these corporations that they get fat, they get on top, and then they just never evolve, never challenge themselves because there's no need to. There's no competition, right?
Yeah.
Um, man, it'd be incredible to it'd be it'd be really interesting to see. Like it got brought up. We were sequel machine as much as I bitched about it. Andrew Garfield was talking about with his new movie. It got brought up him working with Mel Gibson on Hacksaw Ridge and the script for Lethal Weapon 5, which Mel Gibson's trying to figure out how to do. And honestly, I'd still watch that goddamn movie. You make a Lethal Weapon 5, and I will be there on opening
Oh,
day,
fucking
Mel.
yeah, there, yeah.
But they talk
Yeah, I've
about
been
how
waiting for
like
part five for a long time.
it'll be, I mean it'll be interesting to see if they actually do it. And honestly, Mel Gibson is a crazy fuck. Has done a lot of stuff, and dude knows how to make movies. I mean, I watched Apocalypto, I think, earlier this year, and forgot how just
Yeah.
much I missed his style. Like Hacksaw Ridge is great too. Like it's a different way of looking at World War II through through the Pacific Front. Um, just well done. I mean, even back to you go back to I haven't seen it in forever. I watched it probably more than I care to admit as a kid and didn't understand it as well as I probably could now. But like Man Without a
Man without a
Face,
face. Yeah.
yeah, I thought he did a good job in that.
Yeah. I haven't
And
seen that in a long time, but yeah, I remember that movie.
yeah, and now
There's the,
Braveheart.
to what you're saying, do you have a movie that's not gonna have a sequel, somehow an original story, all drama, and yet that the 90s were also loaded with those kind of things, those
Yeah,
type of movies. So yeah.
yeah. So that's it, Ryan. Like we've got to make raunchy comedies and ultra violent action films and go back to the. I mean, I like the '80s style of action movie maybe a little bit more than the
Mhm.
'90s style, but they're both kick ass, and I'd take either one. So which that's a like.
Well,
Uh,
the people that I like directing the 90s action were directing the 80s. Like Dick Donner was doing it in the 80s and the 90s. So,
uh,
yeah.
John McTiernan before he got canceled forever, he was making killer
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh.
No, no, it's the God's telling it. It's actually no, it's a higher power. I can hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mel Gibson's telling us. Mel Gibson, the power of
What is
Mel
that,
Gibson,
Mel?
is telling you, I can't make movies
I
anymore. I've
don't
been
know.
canceled,
I
but
don't
you
know.
can.
Not the voicemails. No, not that. Not that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't care about his ex-wife. Ran. Message declined on that one.
Mhm.
uh, uh,
So,
I think that just about
yeah.
covers it. I don't know what else to be said. So
That's- This has nothing to do with movies, but at the time of this recording, we're about 4 weeks away from, not 4 weeks, sorry, we have like 15 days to the election. And I won't say one side or the other, but I will say that I already submitted my ballot. And after I submitted my ballot, though, and we'll just say for like local election stuff. So there's like a couple characters in the Utah area, people that I like. I says, well, the only thing with, I mean, I was trying to get in early, but I was like, but at the same time, between now and the election period, or like with on election day, like it could turn out that this guy's a complete pedophile, and like I've already submitted my vote, so it's already done.
no October surprise for Ryan.
Yeah. So like, and again, just to keep it safe on the political side, I'm talking about somebody from like who's in Utah, and I was just like, yeah, this guy could turn out to be a complete pedophile, but if I've already voted for him, so later if it turns out it's like you voted for the pedophile, like he could win, nothing can stop the machine because I've already voted, right? So,
You
but
can't recall your vote.
yeah,
Okay, okay, let's parlay that into this, and then we should probably wrap it because I can't wait. I can't wait to be canceled. Actually, I mean, after I show my kids, you know, maybe I'll skip Man Without Face because I think they actually do allude that he's a pedo in that movie. But when I show them Braveheart and Hacksaw Ridge and Passion of the Christ, and they're like, "Who is this magnificent hero?" I'm like, "Yeah, just ignore the things about the voicemails he left and the run-ins he had with the cops. Let your hero still be a hero."
don't go
And
on TMZ
yeah, yeah, he had a lot of great things to say until he said
until he said it all.
them. So don't meet your heroes, kids. And on that note, thank you for listening to this episode of the New Ogden Cinema Podcast. And until next time,
Yeah.
stay classy.